Cucumbers are one of the most impressive plants to grow, producing huge yields of heavy fruits in a short period of time, but they're also some of the most vulnerable plants to both pests and diseases. So in this video, I'll share my toolkit for how to prevent your plants from coming down with pest problems and diseases throughout the growing season. I'll start with what you can do early in the season before you've even planted your seeds, and then move through some techniques you can use throughout the growing season to make sure your plants stay healthy all season long. If your plants already have symptoms of some sort of issue and you're not sure what it is, I have an article linked down below where you can try to identify based on the leaves what's going on with your plants and what you can do about it. Check it out down in the description. So these plants here are about 45 days old and they're showing no signs of disease or pest problems. And I want to share how this was possible, starting with the varieties that I chose to grow. Your most effective method of preventing plants from getting diseases are planting disease-resistant varieties. Cucumbers are important enough of a crop that a lot of effort is put into developing disease-resistant hybrid varieties. Thankfully, as a home gardener, you now have access to a lot of these, and I'd recommend shopping on johnnyseeds.com, which has a filter for specific disease resistance. So if you've had disease problems in the past, it's a good idea to figure out what diseases are prevalent on your plants and in your location first, and then find some cultivars that are resistant to those diseases. These are 3 different types of cucumbers that all have resistance to powdery mildew. This is the Gershwin pickling cucumber, in the middle is the sashimi Asian variety, and at the end is the Diva slicing cucumber. I'll leave a link down below to a resource where you can figure out what code to look for on the seed packet when you're shopping for disease-resistant cucumbers. Another thing you might want to look for when you're shopping for seeds is burpless varieties or bitter-free cultivars. These varieties contain less of the compound that attracts pests to your cucumber plants, so they won't be able to find them as easily. Now I want to move on to the early stage of cucumber growth. This is a vital time to pay attention to your plants and protect them from both pests and disease. The first thing I'd recommend is planting in small containers and transplanting your cucumbers into the garden. There's a common myth that you're not supposed to transplant cucumbers into the garden because their root systems are fragile, and while that may be true, I've always transplanted my cucumber plants and never had issues with them growing into healthy plants. Also, make sure you're not planting your cucumber plants too early. For one, they don't like cold temperatures, so it's always better to wait for those warmer temperatures to arrive and avoid the chances of cold stress, which can lead to disease. And also, the dreaded cucumber beetle is very active in the month of June. So by planting a little bit later, maybe in mid-June or even late June, these plants can still produce a healthy crop before the end of the season. Once your plants sprout, it's a really good idea to cover them with insect netting to prevent flying insects from reaching the plants. We built this mini low tunnel to cover all of our seedlings before they go into the garden to keep them well protected. If you've direct sown in the garden, that's really not a problem. You can still cover them with insect netting, and I definitely would recommend that. But if you don't want to go that route, you can use something called kaolin clay to spray down the young plants and protect them from cucumber beetles and other chewing insects. This clay doesn't kill the beetles, but it will discourage them from chewing on the plants. And lastly, during this stage when the plants are seedlings all the way through to when they have 4 or 5 true leaves, it's really important to keep an eye out and look for these pests and remove them manually whenever you see them. Cucumber beetles will not only damage the plants directly, but they can introduce diseases like bacterial wilt, which can spread from one plant to another and eventually kill the plants. So pest management is more important than you might think when it comes to cucumbers, because it's not only protecting your plants directly, but also from future diseases. And your last line of defense, and this is probably the most important one of all, is to grow your plants vertically like I have them here. Not only does growing vertically save a lot of space in your garden for other crops to be grown, but it also helps prevent disease in a major way. When your plants are lifted up, the fruits will be hanging in open air instead of laying directly on the soil, which can lead to rotting. If you don't provide a support for your cucumber plants, they're going to sprawl and spread out across the soil. These lower growing plants will be much more vulnerable to soil-borne diseases since they're right there against the soil, making it much more likely that pathogens will develop over time. So by lifting your plants up off the ground like this, you have much better airflow. It makes it easier to come through and prune the plants and to harvest the cucumbers themselves when they're ready. Speaking of pruning, it's really important to prune your cucumbers when you're growing them vertically to a single main stem, removing all of the lateral buds or suckers along the way. We have a dedicated video all about pruning cucumbers, which I'll link down below. And in addition to pruning, you want to space your plants properly based on how you plan to grow them. So when you're growing vertically and planning to prune them, you can plant them much closer together. These plants are about 18 inches from one another, and there's plenty of space between the plants for air to flow through and dry off the leaves in the morning and after rainfall. One last thing that's important is planting cucumbers in the right location where they can get full sunlight. If your plants have partial shade, they're not going to grow as vigorously, but they'll also be more vulnerable to diseases because once again, the temperatures will be a little bit cooler and they'll take longer to dry off after rainfall. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We have more videos about cucumbers and a playlist where you can watch all of them if you're new to growing cucumbers. If you want more gardening tips, we have a newsletter where we send out our weekly gardening tips to all of our subscribers. Sign up at the link in the description below. I hope this video helps you get healthy cucumber plants and a huge harvest this season. Thanks so much for watching.